for this moment. It's 5 o'clock on the West Coast, 8 o'clock on the East Coast, and I'm really, really excited for this call this evening. Before we really officially get started, I want to make an announcement first that this call is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. None of the statements made tonight have been evaluated by the FDA. So I just want to make that clear. We're super excited about this call. Just want to let you know it's going to go approximately an hour because we have a lot of information to cover. And I'm going to hand it over to Peter and introduce him in just a second for those of you who don't know him. But if you would like to receive after this call, the recording of this call, as well as the two studies that we're going to be talking about in detail during the call, and a shorter interview from the TV show Greenlaw Report with Dr. Arciero and Peter, put your name in put your email in the chat, or you can also email me and I will put my email in the chat after I introduce everybody. So without further delay, I want to introduce a dear friend and mentor of mine, Peter Greenlaw, and he is so amazing. He helps so many people with their health and wellness. He really is a true health advocate. He's a speaker. He's written 4 books, and I don't have them on me right now, but definitely check out Peter Greenlaw. And I am just so excited about all the great information we're going to be hearing tonight. So, Peter, I'm going to hand it over to you. Take it away and just give us all the scoop.
Well, thanks all of you for being here tonight. I want to start out, and this is coming from my heart. I really believe that there are a few times in history when something happens that's so significant that it changes the world. I really believe that moment is tonight, because what we're going to share with you is world changing. Okay. I have the great distinct honor and privilege to introduce all of you tonight in just a moment to Dr. Paul Arciero, who conducted this groundbreaking landmark study that we'll be going in great detail on the call tonight. So I want to read just a little bit about Dr. Arciero for those of you who don't know who he is. So he's a leading international nutrition and applied physiology scientist, keynote speaker, consultant, and Amazon bestselling author. He has served as a performance physiology and nutrition expert for some of the nation's most elite, including Special Forces Green Berets, Olympic athletes, world-class athletes, and he's been inducted into 3 of the leading health organizations in the world: the College of Sports Medicine, the Obesity Society, and the International Society of Sports Nutrition, and he's on the International Protein Board. Dr. Arciero is arguably considered one of the greatest nutritional researchers in the world for more than 35 years. And also, I want to make it clear, Dr. Arciero is not being paid to appear tonight to share the results of this groundbreaking study. So welcome, Dr. Arciero. What a pleasure to have you tonight.
Wow, so great to see so many faces on here. This is a real treat. It's a little bit later. I'm in upstate New York right now, so I'm 3 hours ahead of all of you, or at least those of you that are on the West Coast. So Peter, thanks for having me. Sandy, obviously also thanks. And yeah, let's dive right in. I'm here.
We have a lot. Yeah, we have a lot to cover. So first, if you wouldn't mind, I think one of the biggest things I want to clear up is the significance of a peer-reviewed study. And especially when it comes to weight loss, nutrition, and obesity, they're very few and far between. And maybe you can touch on one of the reasons for that. But I think we want to set the groundwork that a peer-reviewed study is a really, really big deal. So I'm turning it over to you.
Yeah, it really is. And it's hard to differentiate what is actually science and what's not, especially in this day and age of what we have going on with the pandemic. But media does such a wonderful job. Social media really does such an incredible job of marketing and promoting and sensationalizing what they want the public to follow. And so it's a hard task for scientists who do some of this research that I do to get it out into the public domain, to try to compete with those experts, right? The social media experts that do it much better than most scientists in terms of putting the word out and getting it in front of people's eyes. So I've made a decision, very clear decision as a scientist, to make sure that my voice and my research speaks as loud as the social media gurus and those that are really promoting some of these more not so well-founded scientific breakthroughs. So peer review simply means that when we conduct a study, which takes a long time, it's very arduous, takes a lot of resources, financially, personnel resources, physical structure, commitment from people like all of you that are on this call, to devote their time, energy, and livelihood to conducting and being a part of these research studies, not just the research team itself, but the participants as well. So when we finally collect all the data, and I do what's called interventional research, and I just want to speak to that real quickly. So much of what we hear on the front page news is what is referred to as characterization or cross-sectional research. And that's just taking a snapshot, like you would a camera, of a single point in time with people that are in a particular habitus, living environment, and making a conclusion about what it is that they're undergoing and what they're experiencing at that time. And that has value to some degree, of course, because it helps us characterize certain groups of people and certain experiences that they have. I do interventional research. So what I do is I have people actually follow for an extended period of time lifestyle interventions. Now, I hope all of you just went, oh, man, that's really important, because interventional research is extra hard. It's the gold standard of conducting human clinical research. And so that's what I do. I actually follow these people over time, and we're humans, right? So we're prone to screwing things up and really pushing the envelope and doing things that we have to be careful about when we're in a scientific study. So I follow these people over time. And when it comes to the peer review process, we collect all this data at the beginning and then throughout the time period of the intervention, and then again at the end, and we submit it for review. And when we send it to a journal, a medical journal, the editor gets first pass. So there's a group of editors. It's not just one person. It's a group of editors. It's a team of them. They read it and they determine, is this worthy of sending it out to the experts around the world to determine whether or not this is worthy of being first even read and critiqued by them. And that's where you usually get slashed and put into the dumpster in many cases with scientific research. The editor's making a decision first and foremost at the first pass to say, nope, it's not worthy, let's put it in the trash. Or if they do determine it's worthy, that's the first peer review, they then send it out to the experts around the world. And those experts around the world have to review it and critique it. And it usually goes back and forth literally for months, sometimes a year or more, in terms of what they want to have you correct and improve upon in the study. So that's the research I do. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not something that you can do quickly. It takes a long time. And so oftentimes the review process is longer than the actual study itself. So I just want you to have an appreciation for this, because what we want to share with all of you tonight, and I think we're going to get to this shortly, is data and research that has been collected and passed through this process that takes in really a long time. And it's very, as I said, really arduous, and it's incredibly painstaking at times. But when you get it passed, it holds significant value and credibility. And so I think first and foremost, we're going to be talking about data that has passed through the process of peer review. And so it has tremendous implications for all of you and importance. So I think you should feel really good about what we're sharing tonight. It's not just something that, was done in a, little tiny research lab and was sent out to a journal and published. It was put through a really rigorous process.
Just to emphasize that, please just share briefly the kind of reviewers that reviewed your study.
So in this
important.
particular study, real quickly, Harvard Medical School, Penn State University, the University of Perth in Australia, and then Guangzhou, China University. So leading universities literally across the world. So you guys should feel really good that truly the experts in the world have reviewed this, and you can't argue that. That is something that you should feel really good about in terms of the data and the findings and the results that you all get to benefit from, and then be able to incorporate into your own life. And then I hope share with as many people as you can, because as Peter said at the beginning, and Sandy, we have to change the paradigm of healthy lifestyle, especially surrounding weight loss, because there's too much misinformation out there.
Well, so now I want to jump right into it. So the very first thing I want to do for the audience, again, just for clarity, before we really get into the real details down in the weeds, and that is explain the difference between intermittent fasting and intermittent nutritional fasting and protein pacing, which really is what your study was based on. Even though it says intermittent fasting, it's not intermittent fasting in the conventional sense. So I think we need to create that differentiation, and also let them know that the study was not just based on weight loss, but it was fat loss, hormones, heart health, hunger signals. And also I understand you have an ongoing study, which you really can't talk about, but it is probably the longest obesity study that's ever been done, now approaching a couple of years. So if you can touch on those subjects, and then right after that, I want to jump into the data on those various points.
I'm chuckling because Peter, as you all probably know, he tries to fit everything into a single reply or a single moment. And I really appreciate that. I really do cherish that about you, Peter, because this is important information. So let me just start with, yes, the title of the study that many of you will have your hands on, I hope, and you should. What I try to do when I write a title is I try to make it at least as catchy as what we see on the front page news and what we come across on social media. And so, yes, I used the term intermittent fasting. I used weight loss. So I tried to include those catch terms so that it increases visibility, it increases readability. So yeah, there's a huge difference between what we know as traditional intermittent fasting and, as Peter calls it, intermittent nutritional fasting. I often refer to it in my scientific studies as nutrient dense intermittent fasting. They really mean the same thing: intermittent nutritional fasting and nutrient dense intermittent fasting. And what we're talking about is something vastly different from what we read about and what you have all heard about in terms of intermittent fasting, about not eating anything. That's intermittent fasting. So it's about what you don't eat for a certain period of time, or what you're allowed to eat within a certain window. That's called time restricted eating. With mice and rodents, we call it time restricted feeding, right? Because we feed them through a cage. So with humans, we do time restricted eating, or we do intermittent fasting. We do alternate day fasting. So there's lots of different, catchy terms around fasting. But here's the catch. In every one of those examples of intermittent fasting, whether it's time restricted eating within an 8-hour window, or a 6 or a 4, or whatever someone uses, 12, doesn't matter. It's just a, intermittent fasting, soup du jour, right? Whatever is the catchy thing that day. They pay no attention, and this is the major, I guess one of the major take-home messages I want to send here tonight, is that they pay no attention to the quality of how you are nourishing your body during that time period of you not eating, or eating very little, or during that window of time that you can eat. And that's a huge missed opportunity. That's like having a bullseye, for those of you that have ever done archery before, or darts, and completely turning your back in the opposite direction of the target and throwing the dart just randomly into air. That's essentially what intermittent fasting is. It's just a blinded buckshot attempt at trying to do something that's healthy, and it results in not really favorable benefit. And here's, I'm a scientist, so I read the literature. If I looked a little haggled today, I've been, as Peter said, writing another manuscript that has to be submitted by Friday on this same data. And most people are following intermittent fasting completely erroneously, completely incorrectly, whereby they're just starving themselves and then eating and not really paying too much attention, or paying a little bit of attention to what they eat. And that's unfortunate, because you're really not benefiting nearly what you could. In fact, in some cases, you're actually doing yourself more harm, because we know that many of the research that has been published up until this point on time-restricted eating and intermittent fasting has not been very promising. I know on social media you hear differently. Oh, it's the, it's the, the bullet here that's going to save the day. The holy grail of weight loss when you intermittent fast, and that's just simply not true. The science doesn't show it at all. And the reason why is why we're here tonight, because we do something completely different from what all of the previous studies have done, and all of what you might hear on social media about how wonderful it is. It's really not. We know that you lose massive amounts of lean muscle mass. In some cases, listen to this, in some cases, when you do intermittent fasting, you can lose up to 60% or more of your lean metabolically active muscle mass. That's
Horrifying.
That's horrifying. So not only that, but you don't activate all those cellular processes that are so beneficial for us, like autophagy, that's, house cleaning. So inflammation is not reduced. Your metabolism is blunted, meaning it gets, into hibernation state. So if you're just thinking, oh, I just know intermittent fasting, it's good enough for me, I'm just going to follow this process of not eating, or only eating within a certain window of time, and I'm going to be good. No, you're not. You're actually going to do more harm to your body than good. So that's the main take home I want to express tonight, is that it's really what you're consuming in terms of the quality, not the amount. I'm not talking about the quantity here. What you're consuming during that intermittent fasting time period, or that time restricted eating period. And then what you're doing during the refeeding period. So we have a kind of a fasting period, and then that's the intermittent fasting. And then we have the refeeding period. And those are critical in terms of the quality of the nutrients that you're consuming to activate all of these wonderful things that are happening inside the body. So that's a really good, great place to start. Peter, help me out. What was one of the other things that you had asked on that question?
No, I think you pretty much addressed it. I just wanted people to understand that we're talking about something completely different. And what's so cool, see, science has no emotions. It doesn't care. He's going to present the actual data that's going to prove that protein pacing and intermittent nutritional fasting is like nothing he's ever analyzed in more than 35 years. You correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Arciero, but I believe that's the whole point. The science, it has no emotions. And we're going to share with you at the end a study that was just published actually on diets restricting calories and intermittent time restricted thing. And we'll contrast the difference once you realize what's here. So yeah. I think it's really important now that we kind of jump into, and I want you to take your time and go through in your 35 years, pretty much everything I'm going to share with them tonight, nothing you would have expected or seen. And you believe, you've told me this before, you have for 35 years searched for the silver bullet for weight loss, obesity, nutrition, whatever it was. And you feel, not your opinion, based on the data you're about to share with them, that this is conclusive evidence. There's nothing like this. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And listen, I hope I know I can speak very passionately as Peter can as well. And very excitedly, but this is not my opinion. Everything I'm speaking to you about tonight is science. I just get excited about it because it has to be spread. It has to be shared. So yeah, the data.
Right. So here's what I want to go through for the audience. I'm going to have him go through the actual physical data, not anecdote, but actual physical analysis. Okay. There's several things that we're going to go through. There's weight loss, there's fat loss, removal of toxins, lowering inflammation, blood sugar, high blood pressure. And the last one I wanted to cover, which blew my mind, is something called blood flow that he's going to explain that is so revolutionary. No one's ever seen anything like this before, at least as far as I know, or what you told me, Dr. Arciero. So can we just go through this kind of one at a time and show them the data that kind of has blown your mind when you actually saw the data, because there's no way to skew that data is the data. Am I correct?
The data is the data, yeah. I don't know if you can hear the background, hopefully not, but The ice cream man is
Oh,
driving by
good.
my house right now.
That's appropriate.
Perfect timing.
Night.
This is the quality I'm talking about. So let's just back up real quickly. So what I did was 7 years ago, when I was first, actually it was a little bit longer than that, I was closer to 8 years ago now, maybe, yeah, 8 years ago, when Isagenix first reached out to me because I had a paper published in a leading scientific medical journal looking at my protein pacing and caloric restriction model. And they said, wow, this, fascinating data. It made headline news. USA Today wrote it up, and a couple of major publications, Washington Post. And so they said, we'd love to get our hands on that study. So anyway, make a long story short, I sent them the study. And I said, if you're ever interested in discussing this further, let me know. And they said, well, as it turns out, our company produces some products that seem like they would fit into what you've tested. And I said, oh, what's the name of your company? And they said, Isagenix. And I said, I've never heard of them. So I wrote up a proposal and I submitted it. And within that, I said, the company, Isagenix, does not have first right of refusal, meaning regardless of what I find in my research as an independent third-party scientist at a university, this grant funding agency, Isagenix in this case, has absolutely no say in how I conduct the study, because I have to adhere to very strict guidelines set forth by governing bodies of ethical and sound scientific research. And also, they have no say, zero, in whether or not the data comes out favorable or not. And again, this is something that doesn't happen all the time. When I sent that to them, they responded back and they said, well, of course not. Why would we ever want to mess with what you're doing? You're the expert. And why would we ever want to say what you can or can't publish? You're the scientist. We just want to know if it works because we believe it does. So just keep that in mind, because I had never experienced anything like that. And I had been getting funding from lots of funding agencies up until that point of 7 years ago. So I conducted this study. And what I did was I first was looking at a 1-day intermittent nutritional fast. Now, everyone thinks intermittent fasting just came about in the last 5 years. It's been around for, the history of humankind. But so what I did was I had been doing some of this research. And so I conducted a 1-day intermittent nutritional fast. And the data was mind-blowing. I showed in 12 weeks, those of you that have read the study, over or close to 24 pounds of weight loss in 12 weeks. Actually, it was a little bit less than 12 weeks. It was closer to 11 weeks. So that was incredible. That was a significant amount of weight as a group. These are means now. These are averages. So some lost 60 pounds or more. In fact, some almost lost 70. So on average, it was about 24 pounds in that 11-week time period. And so I said, wow, this is really incredible that they could have had such phenomenal results in such a relatively short period of time. And this was in men and women. And I wanted to see how the body changed in response to this 1-day intermittent nutritional fast using the products that maybe some of you are familiar with. But when we did the study, we measured toxins that were being released from their storage depot, that's their visceral abdominal home, into the blood, because that's the first step of detoxifying the body of toxins. You have to release them. If you don't release them, you can't get rid of them. So you have to first release them. And any scientist knows that that is the telltale sign of the body starting the process of detoxification. If you don't have releasing, then you don't have any process of detoxification. I don't care what anyone says, it's just what has to happen. So it's the most important, by the way, it's the most important step. So we measured the release of these toxins into the blood, and then the subsequent removal from the body is what happens next. We also measured, as Peter described, the things that you're more familiar with, not just their body composition, their weight loss, their overall fat mass, their maintenance of their healthy lean muscle mass. We measured the amount of fat that's accumulated around their visceral organs. It's called visceral fat, which is the most problematic and dangerous to our health. We measured blood pressure, blood lipids, blood sugar. We also measured how well blood flows through their body. So we had measures of very sophisticated laboratory techniques that can assess the rate, believe it or not, the speed at which the blood is flowing through the vessels. So we had really sophisticated techniques that we were able to incorporate. And what we found was really impressive. In that short window of time, in that 11 weeks, these men and women improved every single marker of their health. Now that's very rare in any scientific study. In fact, I'm reading, literally dozens of them right now as I'm writing up this next paper. And it's very rare for a study to see across the board with weight loss. We all think weight loss is healthy no matter what happens, and that's just, not true at all. In every one of these physical health markers, they got significantly healthier, not a little bit, but massively. I mean, on par of what people achieve through really potent pharmacological drug interventions that have, very nasty side effects. So they were having these magnificent results on par with what they would have if they were on medications without any of the side effects. So that was a huge eye opener for me, because I thought, wow, I mean, to witness this firsthand in these people in a relatively short period of time, many of whom had been very, what we call, resistant to these health improvements. So for example, we measured their metabolism, and there's a process that some of you are familiar with called metabolic inflexibility. That's the inability of your body to use and burn nutrients that you're consuming. That's metabolic inflexibility. Here's an analogy. If you were to sit down and have a wonderful prime cut of grass-fed beef, or a plate of pasture-raised eggs. I like using those examples because those are some of the most healthy sources of nourishment we can get. These animal products that have been out in the wild, living in their terrain. And once we consume them, our bodies respond in a phenomenally healthy way. It would be the equivalent of you eating those foods and then your body not utilizing them. It kind of takes them and socks them away and leaves them alone. That's not healthy at all. You want to be able to benefit from the nutrients that you're consuming. So you probably, some of you have heard, you have to eat fat to burn fat. If you don't eat fat, you're not going to ever burn fat. And that was the whole unfortunate duping we had with the USDA many years ago with the food guide pyramid, right? They told us all that fat was bad. All we ate were carbohydrates, and people, ballooned up, and we still are, unfortunately, having the harmful side effects of that misinformation. So metabolic flexibility is allowing the body to take the nutrients that you've just consumed and immediately utilize them for all of the wonderful processes that we need to have happening inside of our body, reducing inflammation, reducing our blood sugar, increasing protein synthesis. That's the accumulation of new metabolically active muscle mass. So we measured all of these things. Every one of these processes went up, unheard of. So that was the first study, and I would encourage all of you. It was published in 3 different papers because we had so much data. The journal editors said, listen, you have so much data, we can't publish it in one publication. And so we had to publish it in 3 different, very what we call high impact medical journals. I would encourage you all to get your hands on those. So we have one paper that focused on the toxins and how the body changed so favorably to those toxins, because normally when we release or we expose ourselves to toxins, the body gets very alarmed, on red alert, and it starts to increase inflammation. You hear a lot about inflammation. And what we were able to do is simultaneously measure the body's level of inflammation while those toxins were being released and getting ready for discharge out of the body. And believe it or not, inflammation plummeted significantly. At the same time, the body's defense system, we call it the antioxidant defense system, went up. That's unheard of. Anytime we expose ourselves to a harmful pathogen or a harmful substance, a toxic substance in our body, inflammation skyrockets. Our body's ability to defend against it is challenged at a very high level. What we found was the opposite. We found that the body got healthier in that response. So what we determined, and what was concluded very clearly by all the reviewers and by our data, was that as this process of the body undergoing its natural detoxification process by following this intermittent nutritional fasting and protein pacing, all of these mechanisms and pathways were significantly upregulated and improved and enhanced. And that's just unheard of. You don't see that often in research at all. And then, so that was one paper. We had another paper that focused on the blood pressure and the blood lipids, the heart health of the individual and the blood flow. Those all went up significantly. And then another paper that was focused specifically on the body composition. So what ended up happening was, after those results came out and they were published and they were very well received, I started diving into the intermittent nutritional fasting, or the intermittent fasting literature, a little bit more. And there was a lot of talk about extending intermittent fasting beyond a 1 day to gain and garner even additional benefit. And that's what this current study sought to do, and actually was able to definitively show, was that using a 1 day intermittent nutritional fast with protein pacing, and I'll talk about that in just a second, with a 2 day intermittent nutritional fast, you get phenomenal health benefit across the board in every variable. In fact, you'll see it in the paper when you read it. If you look at the tables, you'll see the scientific notations that show what was significantly improved. And every health marker increased, whether it was a 1 day or a 2 day intermittent nutritional fast. But here's where it gets a little bit more exciting. In those participants that we had extend the intermittent nutritional fast for an additional day, a 2 day, they had significantly added benefit, added health improvement. So what it's showing is that a 1 day is good, a 2 day is best to really improve our health. And when you combine it with this method of protein pacing, that's the process of fueling your body with the highest quality nourishment that helps our body recover and replenish and rebuild and defend against harmful situations and environments. And that's what protein pacing is all about, is providing the body with the highest quality amino acid profile of protein that we have available on this planet. That's what protein pacing is all about. And it's critical that you do it properly in order to maximize the health benefit that you get from it. So this combination of intermittent nutritional fasting, which is fueling your body with the highest quality nutrients in very small amounts during that period of 1 to 2 days of intermittent fasting, and then immediately refeeding it with the highest quality protein sources that you can get your hands on. That combination is something that I've never witnessed and has never been shown before in the scientific literature. So that's the exciting news.
Well, so I think, as incredible as that first study was, you're even more excited about this one because the results you're seeing here are insane. Am I right? When weight loss, fat loss, removal. I mean, let's go through what you actually saw, like weight loss, fat reduction. I mean, it is unheard of. And this was only a 4-week study as opposed to 11 weeks.
That's right. Yes. So as I said before, in that 11-week study, we showed that the average weight loss was right around that 24 pounds. What we showed in this study in 4 weeks, we found over 16 pounds of weight loss. So they were averaging about a little over 4 pounds of weight loss a week. Now, some of you might be on this call thinking, gosh, that's just not healthy, Dr. Paul. I hear from my dietitian, or I read in the news, or I read medical reports that when you lose that much weight that quick, it's not healthy for you. And actually, that's based on old data. That's based on dogma that we have available to us, right? And so if that's the best that we have at this time, then that's how we make our conclusions. But now that we have this data that shows that you can lose more than that acceptable amount of 1 pound a week, or half to 1 pound a week, not more than 2, they say, to really show health benefit. And I know I have to be careful when I talk about this, but I'm only going to talk about my data. What we were able to clearly document is that even with up to 4 pounds a week in these individuals, their health improved significantly. And again, it I think was a wonderful carryover and addition to that first study that showed a 1 day is great, but when you incorporate this 2-day intermittent nutritional fast, the benefits are even greater. Now, here's something really important, Peter, that's not often emphasized. The weekly total calorie intake was identical between the two groups. So you might be asking, well, how can you get the same number of calories in if you're intermittent fasting for twice the length of time? Well, the reason is because we allowed them slightly more calories on those 2 intermittent nutritional fasting days, not much, maybe 50 to 100 calories, so minimal. But then on the refeeding days, they were able to consume slightly more, so that at the week's end, and this is what makes this data so incredibly impressive, is that there was no difference in the total number of calories that they were eating on a weekly basis. And by the end of the 4 weeks, they were nearly identical, and they were identical in their total number of calories that they consumed over the course of the 4 weeks. Yet they lost significantly more weight, right? So they lost over 16 pounds, those that were doing the 2-day intermittent nutritional fast, compared to just over 10 pounds in the group that was doing the 1-day intermittent nutritional fast. So the next question is, well, was one group doing more exercise? No, because we closely monitor that. We have them wear what are called accelerometer activity monitors. And so they have to wear these during the course of the study, and we can track them remotely in terms of how much they're actually moving. And there was no difference in their expenditure of energy over that 4 weeks. So there's something really unique that's going on.
The other thing I really want you to emphasize is the fat loss, as opposed to losing lean muscle, and actually they increased their lean muscle, which blew you away.
Yeah, that was again, one of those things that we are interested in, because we know that when you have that much weight being lost, there's always the risk that you're going to jeopardize your metabolically active lean muscle mass. And the reason that we want to make sure that we preserve that during weight loss is because it lowers your metabolism. It impacts your risk for a whole number of musculoskeletal conditions, inflammatory conditions, cardiovascular risks. Falling. It makes people more susceptible when you lose that muscle mass. So there's so many downstream negative consequences when people lose that much weight. And you're absolutely right. We were honed in to make sure what is going on with their lean metabolically active muscle mass. And here's what happened. The group that was intermittent fasting for the 2 days had a significant increase. And I was just going to that. Both groups, by the way, had this significant increase, but the amounts were greater in the group that was doing, so I have the data right here in front of me, and it was about 5% versus 3%. That's a lot, in terms of the
increase in lean muscle, increase with the 1 day versus the 2 day. So that's almost a doubling.
Yeah, it wasn't quite that high. I want to make sure I'm being accurate in my. I was looking at the numbers and kind of guessing there, but it was actually closer to a little over 2%, which is still, I bring that up because in that short amount of time, losing that much weight, the fact that you had an increase in the proportion of their lean muscle mass is really important. So what we attribute that to, that increase in the proportion of their lean skeletal, lean body mass, is the processes that are taking place during the intermittent fasting. It's actually turning on your protein synthesis so that when you do go back to refeeding, the body is able to generate that new lean muscle mass. And so that's what's extremely important.
Well, I think also this is going to blow people away, the blood sugar, the blood pressures, and I want you to explain this blood flow and the significance in the arteries and the capillaries, especially in older people, where that really is something where they lose that flexibility.
Yes, so we call that arterial for your blood vessels that are exiting the heart, your arteries, stiffness, arterial stiffness. And so there's a number of different measures that we use, and not to bore you, augmentation index and return time and things like that. those all improved. And what that meant is that as the heart is contracting and pumping the blood out of our aorta, that's our big blood vessel exiting the heart in the left ventricle and distributing it throughout our entire body, and then into the smaller blood vessels, we want to make sure that we don't have a lot of resistance in those major arteries that are exposed to the blood being ejected from the heart out into our periphery, out into our systemic circulation, we call it. That's really problematic. That's really unhealthy if we have a lot of resistance, because it increases turbulence and abrasions in our arteries, and it's what contributes to heart disease. And so we want to make sure that our arteries are very distendable, they're very elastic. And so we want our arterial stiffness to be very low. And so what this study showed, this was in the first study, was that blood flow improved significantly. Our arterial stiffness was reduced significantly. And like you said, as we get older, our blood vessels get much more rigid. They don't have that same ability to distend as they did once when we were younger. And the fact that we were able to document this in as little as this 11-week time period was incredible. So a major finding in terms of that. But like you said, yeah, the data from those two studies in terms of the blood sugar and the blood lipids, both of which are major variables related to our cardiovascular and metabolic disease risk profile, decreased significantly. And again, these are numbers that in some cases you don't see unless somebody is on some medication. And so, for example, the blood glucose dropped 10 points. So if you're familiar with your blood sugar, when you are fasted, it should be under 100, preferably between 60 and 90. So our group of study participants started at 100. And when they finished at the end of the 11-week time period, they were down at 90. Some dropped even below that. And the same thing happened with insulin and the blood lipids. So again, the insulin, the blood lipids all had comparable significant reductions. And impressive because these things are often very resistant to change with just dietary intervention, particularly in a short period of time, or some might change and some might stay the same. Some might even go in the opposite direction that you want. In this case, we showed that these people had a significant improvement. So for example, in the men, they went from 190 milligrams per deciliter of cholesterol. So for those of you that follow your cholesterol level, you want to be below 200. The men in the study were at 190. By the time they finished, they were at 160. They had a 30. That's what I was referring to before, where they had some of their health improvements that were equivalent and actually even better than what would happen if people were on medication. They dropped 30 points in their blood cholesterol. Women started at 200 and went down to 168. So they also had over a 30-point drop, the women. Their LDL, that's their bad cholesterol, also in both groups dropped by 15 to 20 points. So the LDL cholesterol is what we call the bad cholesterol because it deposits on our blood vessel arteries and contributes to heart disease and stroke. And that reduced by 15 to 20 points in these men and women. So incredible changes. Blood pressure dropped by, I'm looking at the data here between the men and the women, and the women had an 8-point drop in their blood pressure, which is, again, an incredible finding. The men had a 10-point drop in their blood pressure, again, without medication. In fact, many of them had to reduce the amount of medication if they were on any blood pressure lowering or cholesterol lowering or blood sugar lowering medications.
I just want to clarify. So are we talking about this 4-week study that's now peer-reviewed published, or are you talking about the previous study? Just to clarify.
Yeah, so that's good.
I'm confused.
Yeah. The data that I was just sharing with you was the first round of data. And the reason why I shared that with you is because that was the 11-week study that was looking at this larger group of men and women. focused on just this 4-week study. So if we were to look at just
Yeah,
the 4-week
let's look
study,
at that.
yeah. So the 4-week study, the reason why there was less of a decrease in these men and women was because they were healthier than the first study. And that's a really important point. So for example, glucose stayed for the most part the same, because in the intermittent fasting 1-day group, they started at 88, 89. And so they finished at about the same level. And that's a healthy blood pressure. So they didn't have a lot of room for improvement in that. Whereas in the intermittent fasting 2 group, they started a little bit higher. They started at 98 milligrams per deciliter of blood sugar. They went down to 92. So overall, there was a drop in the blood sugar in both groups, but it was much more pronounced in the
48 hours.
in the 48-hour group, because they started at a slightly higher level.
Well, that's what I wanted to emphasize, that everybody understood that. And then also, I think, again, to clarify for the 4-week, that blood flow, I mean, you measured that as well. And did that also show significant improvement with the 48 hours?
So we didn't do the blood flow that we had done in the previous study. We only did the blood pressure.
Right.
And in the blood pressure, it dropped significantly, dropped by nearly 7 to 10 points in 4 weeks in both groups.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. Yes. And cholesterol dropped by 30 points. In fact, a little bit more than 30.
In 4 weeks.
In 4 weeks, they had a 30.
Wow.
They had a 30-point drop in their cholesterol. One thing I do want to point out, though, Peter, and for all of you, is one of the things we're concerned about when we put people on a calorie-restricted diet in the form of intermittent fasting, or just cutting calories to help people lose weight, is their brain neurotransmitters and chemicals get disrupted, and it's not a healthy response. People have harder times sleeping. They have a more difficult time concentrating. They have a more challenging time relaxing when people are reducing and restricting calories to such a degree to result in a healthy, or at least in this case, very significant weight loss. So some of the markers that we use to gauge how the brain is changing are things like questionnaires that are called the profile of mood state. So they're mood disturbance. And I can just say that that data is not published yet, but it improved drastically. So not only did these people lose this weight at such a significant degree, 16 pounds in 4 weeks, and the reductions in blood sugar and blood pressure and blood lipids that I just shared with all of you, but they also, this is going to blow you away, they also had less of a desire to eat, and their hunger ratings that we measure in the lab decreased significantly, 40%.
Wow.
So I want to say that again, because they were consuming 1,000 calories or more less than what they were accustomed to eating. And their brain signals of hunger and their desire to want to eat reduced by 40%. That's unheard of. So Peter, you started by saying, in my 35-year career, have I ever seen anything at this level? No, not even close. I mean, these variables alone, the fact that I'm looking at it right now in the published paper, kind of send chills up my back, because we have never scientifically been able to state with this much confidence that following a nutrition intervention can elicit and produce and result in such across the board favorable responses in a person's health. And particularly when it comes to feeding behaviors, in this case, feelings of hunger, desire to eat, quantity of what they can eat, those things plummeted.
Well, and again, back to your 35 years of diet that you've analyzed and other studies that have been done, nobody's ever seen anything like that before. When you consider they've lowered the calories that much, and yet they're more satisfied. You know, we've had a lot of people that said just after 4 days, my gosh, all my cravings are gone. Now it makes sense. That's why this is occurring. But in just 4 weeks, it's just crazy. 40, I mean, that's just unheard of. That's why, not to jump ahead, but, in conclusion, I want to make sure we cover the fact why you believe that, this is a lifestyle that people want to do for the rest of their lives. Don't answer that quite yet, because again, I want to come back to the point that this study blows away anything that you've really ever seen before. Now, for all of you, from a scientific standpoint of view, Dr. Arciero sent me a new study from the New England Journal of Medicine, certainly regarded as one of the highest academic, papers in the world. Okay, their published study on obese people, where they took basically a diet lowering calories and compared it to intermittent fasting, the time restricted. In 12 months, and these were obese people. You correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Arciero, but this is how I read it. Not read it. Here was the data. In 12 months, there was no difference in the weight loss, whether they were on a calorie restricted diet or this time restricted. That's just the data. But listen to this. So he said his average or the mean in the 4 weeks was 16 pounds, 4 pounds a week. Okay. What he didn't say is there were people that lost more than 30 pounds in 30 days, but let's leave that. Let's just stick with 16 pounds. The data from the New England Journal of Medicine, I wish I could ask all of you, but I'm going to give you the answer. These were obese people in 12 months. Their average weight loss in 12 months was 16 pounds. If you needed evidence to determine whether this is more effective than diets or intermittent, I mean, again,
Peter,
data,
let me just add something in there. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, so what we were able to document scientifically in our study was a weight loss of 16 pounds and more in our group in 4 weeks, equivalent to what this study published in one of the leading medical journals in the world took them 12 months to achieve. Now, here's where you have to read the fine print, and I've read the study very closely. They had regular weekly, monthly monitoring of these study participants. So this wasn't like, hey, here's what you have to do, go out into the wild and live it and see what happens. They didn't do that at all. I mean, they were closely monitoring these people, which puts into question even more that why would anybody want to follow intermittent fasting or just a low calorie diet to get those kind of results without the support that they had in the study? Does everybody understand that? That's a major, major point here, is that even with all of the support that they were providing these individuals over the course of the 12 months, they were still only able to achieve a weight loss that we were able to achieve in 1 month. So yeah, it is almost laughable, but it clearly separates. And again, I love, when this happens because it brings us full circle to what we started the evening on. And that is, it all comes down to the quality of what you're nourishing your body with. And don't for a second think that any nutrition program is all about what you don't eat or what how much you can eat within a certain time period, because that's what every diet up until now in the history of humankind has focused on. Just don't eat within a certain period or eat within a certain period, paying very little attention to the quality of what you're doing, what you're actually ingesting and consuming during those time periods. Someone asked, what is protein pacing? Protein pacing is the foundation of any diet. Whether you're on a ketogenic diet, a paleo diet, a plant-based diet, whatever, again, diet you want to maybe emphasize. I call them emphasizing because I don't think you should be doing any of those without doing what we're talking about here. But in terms of proportion of macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fats, at the very minimum, your body requires and needs, not, it's not something that can be just arbitrarily chosen, needs a foundational amount of dietary protein and high quality dietary protein. And I'm a proponent of both animal and plant sources. However, they have to be of the highest quality. You can't just go out and get a conventionally sourced piece of animal or plants, for that matter, vegetables and fruits, and think it's going to serve your body well. It just simply isn't. We know that. And people don't ever make that distinction. They say, oh, meat's bad for you, or animal products are bad, and I'm just going to be a vegetarian. Then they go to a grocery store and they buy conventional produce, fruits and vegetables. Well, that's crap, right? I mean, it's laden with pesticides and harmful chemicals and residues that are actually much more harmful for you. So, we have to make sure that we talk about apples to apples here. But there's no doubt that animal consumption of foods, whether it's whey protein or a piece of steak or beef or pork or chicken or fish or whatever it might be, eggs, are some of the highest quality nourishment we can get. But again, it has to be of the highest sourced type of product that you can consume, and the same with plant-based products. So we can talk more about that, but protein pacing is essentially this: you're consuming the highest quality protein, and I'm a believer that the ability to take in the highest profile amino acid profile that you can consume first thing in the morning and the last thing at night is the most important thing you can do for your body. The reason is you're coming off a 12-hour or more, in some cases, fast. So you want to fuel your body with the highest quality nutrients at that first step in the morning. And then before you go to bed at night, you want to make sure that you're getting in the highest source to help, carry over until the next morning. So I am a proponent of fueling your body with a protein shake that has the necessary amount. So it's about first thing in the morning, last thing at night with the two highest source quality of protein. And then in between during the day, 2 additional meals of the highest quality protein. Now, in some cases, not everyone can fit in 4, but if you're doing it in the way that I've described, sometimes it makes it a lot easier. So that would be, and it has to be in terms of the amount of protein, it's very dependent on your body size. So you can't just give an arbitrary set number for everybody. That would make no sense at all. Telling a 120-pound woman to take in the exact same amount that a 220-pound man does, that's just mindless to suggest that. So I give a range of a minimum of 20 to as much as 40. Some cases you need a little bit more than 40, but it has to be somewhere within that range that you should be taking in at those 4 feedings over the course of a day. That's protein pacing, and it should be separated by a minimum of 3.5 hours. You don't want to be eating in closer proximity to 3.5 hours, because that's going to bathe your blood in too high of a state of blood glucose, and you're going to have insulin be released, and that's not good because that stores energy into our cells of our body and actually makes us more fat. So you don't want to be eating more than every 3.5 hours. That's an absolute minimum time period that you should go. It should be closer to the 4-hour time period. So that's protein pacing.
Well, in conclusion, I got one sort of final question, and I think this may be the most important. So again, based on your 35 years, but particularly based on this published study that's out now, the 4-week, I mean, what would you tell everyone about, and I know there's longer ones you can't even talk about, but this is not a diet. This isn't about losing weight. It's about a lifestyle for all of us for the rest of our lives. You just touched on like a shake for breakfast and a shake at night. Just that alone would be a tremendous upgrade for so many people in their lives. But again, back to the silver bullet you found, would you say that that's one of the conclusions that you came to, that this is way beyond a diet? This is like a lifestyle. If you could just close with that, I think that would help everybody to understand why it's so important that they continue. Because I get that question, do I have to do this for the rest of my life? I think your data supports the fact you'd almost be crazy not to. So I'll let you close with that.
Well, I don't know how much more I can add to that, Peter. I think absolutely everything that we've talked about tonight is a lifestyle. There are some subtleties and nuances to it. For example, I wouldn't necessarily, in somebody who is at a healthy weight and body composition, intermittent nutritional fast for 48 hours on a weekly basis. That would just not be healthy for somebody. But for somebody who is in a state of what we call active weight loss, dynamic weight loss, well, then it could be exactly what you need to do. So again, you have to have a little bit of nuance to how you apply this, but clearly I'm somebody at 60 years old who has been following this for decades and would consider this the only lifestyle I would want to continue to live with. And many others do the same thing. And I'll intermittent nutritional fast for a 2-day time period once every 2 or 3 months. And I sometimes will vary that depending upon my activity level and my situation of what I'm going through. But clearly, everybody benefits from intermittent nutritional fasting. It doesn't matter if you're a top-tiered professional athlete or you're somebody at the furthest end of the scale and needs a life intervention a lifestyle intervention to save your life, you would need to intermittent nutritional fast and protein pace. So yeah, those two, the combination of the intermittent nutritional fasting and the protein pacing is paramount. You know, if you don't have my book that covers a lot of this, The Prize Life, it's called The Prize Life, Prise. You can buy on Amazon. It goes into great detail on all of this, because I've written in this book exactly what I include and use in these scientific studies of intermittent nutritional fasting and protein pacing. I also combine or put into the book the exercise component, which is so important, which we can talk about another time. But to answer your question, without question, this is a lifestyle. This is not something that you want to move in and out of on a temporary basis or a quick fix. That would, I mean, you benefit from it, but you wouldn't have any long-term or long-standing or residual benefit if you're not doing it on a regular basis in terms of how you live your life. And that is super important. And like you said, there's really nothing better than to start your day and end the day with the highest quality of nourishment that your body desires and needs than to do that. So,
well, Dr.
we covered a lot.
I can't thank you enough. Yeah, we basically got a doctoral seminar here. We actually did it in an hour. So number one, I want to thank you very much. And then I want to invite all of you, we're going to stop the recording. Sandy has an announcement of an event that I'm going to be hosting and actually funding that we'd like to make available to anyone that's interested